Hey, we're back, and today we're going to talk fire stopping. And we're not talking
Fire
about
and draft stopping.
and draft stopping. We're not talking about a garden hose or a fire hose. We're talking about fire stop, draft stop, and this is stuff we'll get into here in a second. So, before we get started, make sure you dingle on that bell down there, and then also mash that subscribe button. That way, you get notified next time we post another video. So, and of
Right.
course, leave us some notes down there because those are always good to do too. So there you go. Draft stop. I think we've both kind of run into this recently on our own jobs. That's what
Right.
brought this up. And so let's go ahead and get into this real quickly. What is
So, like you said, we both run into this, and when you do commercial work, it's a little more involved because you have to design the building. So, what's the difference between fire stop and draft stop?
right?
So, fire stop really is to prevent the spread of fire and smoke throughout the penetrations and joints in fire resistant rated walls, floors, and ceilings. Okay.
Right.
So that's fire stopping, whereas that's mostly commercial. So you got to go around pipes and ducts between floors and expansion joints, right? So you got to use the materials are typically sealants, collars, pillows, mortar, and it has to be tested and rated for use, whether it's 1 hour, 2 hours, etc. So the graphic you have up right now, the first one is a collar that would go around a PVC pipe, and that what that does, and the one in the center is the pillow. Those will literally go around a pipe, and a PVC pipe can burn and melt. But what happens in the heat, these collars and that pillow can expand 20, 30 times, and it'll fill the void where the pipe used to be, thus stopping the fire and smoke, but more importantly, air movement, air, oxygen feeding the fire.
Right. That's the draft stop part of it.
That's the draft start part of it. And I think where when we start talking about draft stopping, the purpose of draft stopping, and that's mostly in residential, is to limit the movement of air, smoke, and fire within concealed spaces, but not particularly rated assemblies. So
Okay.
think about this. If you're building, in residential, you build 2x4 walls and you guys run conduit from the basement through the bottom plate,
Right.
by the stud up through the top plate. You have now given a path for air to move, or smoke, or even fire to move from the basement through that wall assembly up into the attic.
Correct.
Well, residential code doesn't require you to make it a 2 hour wall, or, like a 2 hour wall would be 6 inch block or 2 layers of 5/8 drywall on both sides.
Hmm.
But they want you to stop or slow the smoke and fire from going from the basement to the attic. So you have to put in fire stop around it, a draft stop, I should say.
Correct. I was just going to say that.
To be correct, yes, a
Yes.
draft stop.
Right.
And where this really comes from then is the products. All right. So where do you use it? Well, combustible, particularly wood frame buildings, right? Different portions between the floors, attics. This picture I thought was interesting because for whatever reason, if you notice, the sheathing's not touching the studs. It's almost like everything is
Right.
offset by almost an inch.
Yeah.
So what happened is they're forced now to do a fire stop at the top plate
Uh-huh.
and every 10 feet. So if you notice, the stud all the way to the left
Yep.
has packing also.
Right here.
Yes. So that stops it from moving, a fire moving horizontally through the wall. And then at the top, it keeps it from moving vertically
Right.
into the attic space. So that is a combination draft stop, fire stop. And I say it that way, even in residential, because that draft stop will stop air movement, but you need something solid to stop fire. So in residential, we do some fire stopping, and that's usually going to be in soffits and things.
Right.
Before we get into that, let's talk about more like a commercial phase,
Okay.
our wall assemblies. So again, in commercial units, you're typically going to have these wall assemblies. So fire partition, right,
Yep.
between two units, whether it's two apartments, two storage units, whatever it might be. A 1 hour is your minimum, and that's tenant separation, right? A 1 hour wall is going to be 5/8 on both sides.
Right.
Fire for 2 hour, higher protection required different type occupancy. So when we say different type of occupancy, I can have office on that side, but I might have maybe a restaurant kitchen on this side, which might be a bad example. A restaurant kitchen would probably require a 4 hour. But just different occupancies, a barber shop versus a deli, that where they want that separation. They might kick you to a 2 hour wall. The 2 to 4 hours of true separation, that typically is going to be something where you have combustibles, right? Or explosives even.
Yeah.
So, so that rating is based on occupancy classification. And you can find all this on NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 101 will give you all of these classifications, whether it's office, restaurant, whatever, and then tell you kind of what you need. So, and I've recently ran into something like that with just plain offices. And it just like a regular code book, it reads in circles,
Right.
so you have to read through the whole thing to figure it out. But what I did run into was, and it's the first time I've ever seen one, the office work that I'm doing right now, the build out between the two units I'm working on and the next unit is a 6 inch block wall.
Okay.
Now, I've seen 4 inch block and I've seen 8 inch block. I've really never run into 6 inch block. 6 inch is still going to be cheaper. Fire
Oh,
department at the time says you got to have a 2 hour separation.
right.
So why would you spend money for an 8 inch block, which gives you 3 to 4 hours? So they did 6 inch. But
Okay.
where it got interesting for me was that there at one point was a doorway cut in from one unit to the other through the 6 inch block.
Okay.
So I framed it with 1 5/8 studs, both sides, and then 2 layers of 5/8 drywall. And he said to me, he says, the fire, no, this should be block wall, block in the hole.
Mm-hmm.
I go, no, the code says I have to continue the assembly.
Right.
6 inch block is 2 hour. Staggered framing, 1 5/8 metal studs with 2 layers of 5/8 on each side is in fact a 2 hour assembly. So I've maintained the assembly.
Wow.
I won that one. I lost the second one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So these are very easy to find, and 5/8 drywall is your buddy, when it comes to doing stuff, even in residential, years ago, we had to put 5/8 drywall above furnaces
Right.
in basements and stuff. And I think they still do that. And then they've gone so far as even if the house is not fully protected, we had to put a sprinkler head above the furnace,
Uh-huh.
just tied into the water system. So a lot of things change, right? I don't have a problem doing fire protection. It's just you gotta give me the rule book in
Right.
English or together. You know what I mean? And that's what
Yep.
we've products that we want to use to create fire stops. So you need fire barrier sealant, something like this, which is a caulk that you would put around a pipe. But
Right.
again, it's only good on pipes up to 2 inches. If the pipe is larger than 2, then you may have to use a collar or you may have to use a wrap. So you've got to go through the fire thing and figure it out. So I made a comment a second ago that I not beat, but I won my argument with the fire inspector on point 1 about the 2 hour assembly.
Right.
Where I did lose was when I went to use a fire foam, which we've probably all done.
Yep.
Orange foam
Yes.
from your box store.
Yes.
Okay. This is what I use to fill some holes and stuff.
Okay.
No good.
Really?
Two things. He goes, this is not approved for commercial use.
Oh,
It says right here, construction trades, homeowners, residential and commercial fire block and draft stop. It says applications. All right. Tested in accordance to ASTM E84 modified UL 723 meets current blocking. Okay.
right.
Why can't I use this? Might be because if you read all the fine print, it doesn't meet flames So here's something that you need to see. This comes from a box store, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. So that's the foam you just did.
It's highly flammable.
Whoa. I just stopped the share so that you could. That should not do that. That should not do that. That
You
is
would think, right? Not a
that
good
was
idea.
absolutely amazing.
It's highly flammable.
That's not supposed to be like that.
One would think. So in this picture, everywhere you see all that orange foam,
Yeah.
no bueno.
Wow. So
Don't use this stuff.
so what about there's great stuff.
They make plenty of other foams that are correct,
There.
but they're more expensive. The problem
Oh,
is, right, the box stores won't carry it because it's expensive. You're gonna have to go online.
so
You can find all of
I've
the products from, if you go back now to
yeah,
that fire caulk that we just showed, the 3M or
right.
the, it's 3M. Look, so is that. So it's not all 3M products are bad. That fire barrier caulk
Yeah.
is fine. That expands when it hits a certain temperature. This does not expand and it's highly flammable.
So there's also the red that I think Great Stuff makes them, and it's a draft stop fire stop.
Yep.
And I've used that a lot, but I've never tried
Yep.
to light it. What
Pretty
made you
funny,
try to
huh?
light it?
Well, it was, and the one that actually showed me how flammable it was not the fire department. It was actually a guy I had bring in to take this out of the holes in the wall and from around the pipes, and we packed them properly with mineral wool and proper caulks and collars.
Okay.
And he charged me $650.
Uh-huh.
Can't not complaining because it was two guys, couple 3 hours. You know what I
Right.
mean? They did
Right.
it all properly. How long would it take me to chase the stuff down? So I
Yep.
passed my inspection then. But I don't have a problem with education.
Sure.
So if you're doing a large project, it's one thing. But even in residential, this would be acceptable in residential around pipes and stuff. But I wouldn't use it ever again. I'd stick with the caulks, the fire
No.
barrier caulks. Don't ever use the foam is nice because it's easy. Just I can reach the top leg, go done.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's that flammable, that was on a Bic lighter. You got a house fire where you're pushing 15, 1800 degrees. How long is that going to last?
So
I like
now
how it just clears it.
that can says that it's a draft stop, or does it say
Both.
it's both?
Both. This is interior construction,
Yep.
residential and commercial, fire block and draft stop. And it's, I don't know what I paid for this, $8, $9 a can, whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't go very far.
No, they don't.
But yeah, this one's actually pretty full. And I have another full one that I'm taking back to the store. But yeah, be very careful because this fire block foam is not what you need to use. It might be legal in residential, but that tells me I wouldn't use it.
Yep. Exactly.
Get the caulks. Crazy.
To the share.
Back to the share. Okay.
Use the fire sealant.
Yep.
And this stuff has fibers in it. It looks like it's got little bits of fiberglass in it. So it really, it's really sticky too. It works really well.
Right.
So, yeah.
They make strips and rolls that you can put around pipe. This one in particular is the Spec Seal. So Spec Seal makes a strip you put around pipe.
Okay.
This one is an insert you put in your 1900 boxes. Now, if you have a wall assembly that say this side's 2 layers of 5/8, and you got an outlet right here, a 1900 box.
Yeah.
Well, now you don't have a full 2-hour assembly because you have this hole.
Right.
So you want to take one of these pads, you put it in the back of that box, pull your wire. If the fire gets in there, that pad is called intumescent. It will expand and will cut off the fire and airflow. That can actually expand up to 24 times its size. So if it's an 1/8 inch thick, right? Do the math, 1/8 inch thick, and it expands 24, you're gonna have 2-inch fill. And the box is 1.5 inches deep. It's gonna blow the outlet out. So you want to use those pads in 1900 boxes to stop. The tape does the same thing, and that would go around, say, a pipe that's over 2 inches. So if you got a 3 inch pipe, you go around it 2, 3 times. If that expands, it'll close the 3 inch. When you start getting into 4, 5, 6 inch, that's where the collars are. Those are thicker layers of the same intumescent products, but then we'll close off that whole joint. So that's your collars, which,
These are the
yeah,
big.
those are the collars that would go, and that's got, you can see how it's got just a clamp. You put it
Yep.
around there and then you just
Oh,
clamp it.
this. Yep.
Yep, close that clamp. But that pipe can burn away, and once that collar gets hot, it's going to close that off. Pretty cool stuff, actually.
Yes, that's
And if you
amazing.
hit that's your putty, right, or your caulks, like we
Okay.
showed earlier. But if you look at that, it's highly intumescent. That can expand up to 8 times. So that's what we use. If I need to go around Romex, phone lines, cable lines, things like that that are going through a wall assembly. We use that around them because I can pack it in there. I can build it up, and you can either use the tube or you can use the spatula and just the knife and cut it, push it in there. And that's the red stuff you're talking about.
Okay.
So those work great. No solvents, low VOC, right?
Uh-huh.
Crazy. All right. So those are your kind of barriers, fire stop. But what do we do for draft stopping? Okay, draft stopping, typically residential.
Here's your draft stop. This is exactly what I was talking about before we got started. That when you go walk through a fire and you see how it expands and can just run crazy because you don't do this. Usually now we have to build a soffit. We throw up drywall and then we frame out our soffit.
Correct.
That way the fire, if it comes up the wall, it doesn't get in the soffit and then spread horizontally across everywhere. You're gonna
Right.
you're gonna stop it.
And the same with that fire block they show at the back. If you had a fire in the wall below, say at the back of the range, it's not going to run up the wall and get into the soffit or into the second floor. It is stopped in that space.
Right.
It's where that's why I said I don't fight the fire department on this. As long as we know what we need to do, and a lot of it seems like common sense, right? If I have the potential for a fire here, so our horizontal fire blocking is usually, we used to do it at 8 foot. So if I built a 10-foot wall at 8 foot, we'd solid block it, and that's your fire stop.
Correct.
Same thing on any open soffit, right? You build a soffit at the backside. Fortunately, we got rid of soffits.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of soffits anymore, so it's like
No. But we do these, the tray ceilings and those kind of coffered ceilings. And so
yeah,
drywall the whole thing, and then we build the coffers inside of all that.
yeah.
Doing it before.
So those are typically you can use for draft stopping like that, and that's more residential. But there you just use 1/2 inch or 5/8 drywall. I mean, you use 3/8 minimum plywood, right? Minimum thickness.
Right.
It doesn't take that much to stop all that. Some places you can use fiberglass insulation, but be very careful. Some places don't allow it. Fiberglass just isn't as good as this here's mineral wool.
Right.
So mineral wool or rock wool are basically the same thing. They do not burn. They hold their shape. They don't make you itch. They stay in place better than fiberglass. If you use it actually as insulation.
Correct.
So that stuff works really well as a fire stop. So the NFPA says, and this is what happened with mine. So the holes I had filled with this,
Uh-huh.
my fire guy that I had come out, and he's from Queenslander. I'm not going to get a discount. Queenslander Construction down here.
Uh-huh.
They took that foam out. They packed the holes with rock wool, and then they mortared over it all.
Oh, really?
So now everybody's happy. I have a fire break because I've got the rock wool.
Right.
Stops smoke and fire. And then the hole is then covered with mortar, which obviously mortar doesn't burn. So I thought I was good when I foamed everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fire block, it burns pretty good.
It burns way too good.
So the whole point of all this was to get you to look at the NFPA 101, figure out what you're dealing with.
Well, and
And don't purchase your products based on only on label.
Yes,
You're
that's
probably not going to be able to get this at the box stores. You may have to actually go to a construction supply outfit.
all right. Well, hopefully we've described a little bit of fire stop, draft stop, and you know what the difference is. And next time you open up a wall and you see some holes going horizontally, vertically through the, go ahead and caulk them in, fill them in, stop that draft from going through there. That'll help prevent the fire from coming through and draft stopping and also fire stopping. So, and we've kind of learned a little bit about what products to use and what not to use. All right. So with that, hit that subscribe button, dingle on the bell, and of course, leave us a note down below if you've got a comment or a question. And with that, I'll say, keep it square and level.
Till next time.
Until next time. There you go.